and welcome to another weekly update. I hope you had a good week and are looking forward to a good week ahead. A couple of interesting things to talk about this week, so let's get into it. First thing to tell you about, I did do a blog post about something we talked about last week around something I noticed in Microsoft Graph, specifically this new solutions endpoint. So if you've listened to last week's update, you'll kind of know most of this, but I did write it up as a blog post just because I thought it was interesting. So you can go and read that to understand exactly what's happening here with this solutions endpoint. I put some thoughts right at the end as to why I thought this was happening. There's a couple of different reasons. I mean, fundamentally, we don't know, so we're going to have to wait and see. We don't know why Microsoft does this stuff and what the reasoning is, but I've sort of given some ideas of what I think it might be. I thought it was interesting. It's one to watch for sure to see kind of how this comes. It feels like something that's going to happen throughout the course of this year. They're readying it. They're not ready to talk about it yet, and that's fine. It's just one to be aware of and to watch out for so that when the announcements come, at least you'll understand the context in which they're happening, and you'll be in a really good place then to understand what it means, and it won't be a big surprise. So that's good. And that's really, in a way, that's what a lot of these weekly updates announcements are for. And the kind of purpose of them is to make sure you don't get any big surprises. So by signaling stuff as soon as and early as I see it, even if it's not fully formed and we've still got lots of questions, at least that way you're all prepared. Okay, let's move on to something else. I've talked about the DevProxy before. I've talked about it a lot. Waldek and Gary over at Microsoft do amazing work iterating on this, and they've got another version out. It's version 0.15 or 0.15. And it's always fun when they have a new version because in each new version, they bring new features, new capabilities. And it's always exciting to see what they're bringing because they're really dialed into the community and they're really dialed into feedback and they're really thinking about how, actually, as a developer, how am I going to use this? What are the things that would make my workflow, my day better? And this is exactly one of those things. So in this new version, they've got support and they're moving kind of more and more away from kind of just Microsoft Graph. It's becoming a Microsoft DevProxy. So with this release, they've got support for simulating CRUD APIs that are secured with Microsoft Entra, so Azure AD. And this is really interesting because if you're a developer working in a team and some group of people are doing the APIs, you're doing a front end maybe, and you're working in parallel, quite often you're very dependent on those API calls. You know, you need the API calls to be done before you can start to put your stuff together, or you're doing mocks or something like that. With this, you can actually simulate those calls, but not only that, you can simulate the authentication with Microsoft Entra. And that's a big part of that front-end API management stuff, is figuring out the authorization flow. Actually, this is really, really good as a front-end developer because it allows you to get working on that stuff from day one. You're not needing to wait for the API team to stand up the API and secure it with Microsoft Entra. So really, really nice. So all of that access, that sign-in stuff, that access token stuff. Oh, let me share my screen because there's some good screenshots in here. All of that sign-in stuff, that access token stuff is all here in the proxy. You can get going with it. You can start writing your code before you've actually got an API to call. Really, really nice. A couple of other things they've got as well, which are good, like just feedback stuff. So like running multiple instances, some more flexibility around how they do throttling or simulating of throttling, which is good. Better support for cores, lots and lots of things. So there's lots in this release. So I would say go and have a look at it. But that first feature is a really big one for me. I think it's really good for dev teams, and it's really good for front-end developers. And even if, so here's a challenge, right? If you're a front-end developer and you know that you have a bit of a gap in your knowledge there around how to secure API calls, don't wait for the project to come up that needs that knowledge. Don't wait for that to be the thing, and then you'll be like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Actually go and get the DevProxy. You could start today. You don't need an endpoint. Just make one up. Just like simulate it enough so that you can just write that code, and then it's in your back pocket for the next project you come along. It's like, oh yeah, I've got this. I know how to do authorization against Microsoft Entra. I know how to go and get access tokens. I've got all this stuff done. It's over here. you could do that today as like an R&D project or just like a personal kind of project to make yourself better. So that's the sort of stuff I like, is, you know, stuff you can be doing in the background so that when it comes up in a project, you can look like a hero because it's like, oh, I've done this one already. This is fine. So anyway, that's cool. All right, new blog post by Toshiko Numito. He's the EVP and Chief Marketing Officer at Microsoft. He's the kind of head honcho in the kind of AI space at the moment, and he's got a blog post about some of the events in 2024. So this is an interesting blog post because it's signaling Microsoft's top tier events for 2024. And we haven't seen blog posts like that for a while. It's been a little while since, you know, Microsoft have been quite tentative back into the big conference space. I know we had Ignite last year, but it was kind of smaller than normal. And same with Build. We've got Build coming up this year, and we've also got Ignite coming up this year. And Ignite this year is going to be in Chicago. Now, that is a big departure for Microsoft since pandemic, because up until that point, all of the top tier conferences, the Builds and the Ignites, have been held out of Seattle. And so that's a slightly smaller venue. It's a slightly smaller event. It's easier for Microsoft to work with because it's closer to HQ. Ignite in November is going to be in Chicago. That's going to be a big event. We don't know where. My guess is it's the Marconi Conference Center. That's where they previously had Ignites, or at least one Ignite in Chicago. I was there for that. It was fantastic. Good event. I really, really hope it's going to be the same kind of vibe this year. I'm seriously considering going because I think it's going to be fantastic. So just let you know there's some events coming up. But this is really good, like Microsoft getting back into big top tier events. They're doing it through the focus and through the lens of AI because that's kind of where their focus is right now, and that's cool. If that's what it takes to get big events up and running, I'm cool with that. All right, last thing I want to tell you about real quick. I just think this is really cool and useful. It's a blog post on the Tech Community site all around how there's this program or this service called draw.io, which allows you to create diagrams, right? Not a Microsoft thing, not associated with Microsoft, but they allow you to import CSV files that kind of contain a structure for how to do the drawing. And this person has this legend. I'm not sure if he's an MVP or a Microsoft person or what, but he has worked out some PowerShell scripts to take an Azure sort of set of Azure resources and turn them into that kind of import CSV code and import them into draw.io, meaning that you can go from some script here to go and take some things that you've got in Azure. I'm just going to skip through this script, blah, 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 and get them into a CSV, meaning that you can produce automatically really good looking Azure diagrams for your resources. I thought that was really cool. Super useful. It's a thing people like to do all the time, or have to do all the time, is create these architecture diagrams. It always pains me that we've got the whole structure in Azure and you can't just export it as a diagram. I think this is really neat. I think it's a really good way forward. So that will be useful to lots and lots of people I know. It'd be useful to me, so I just wanted to let you know about it. That's a thing I'm going to be using as well. All right. I think that's everything from me this week. Next week, all being well, I shall be doing a weekly update from the Microsoft campus because it is MVP Summit week, so that should be good. So look out for that. I can figure out how to do that, but let's not worry about that now. Whatever it is you're doing this week, have a great one, and I will speak to you again next time.